Good morning. Thank you very much, Vic and Mona, for joining me today. It's been a pleasure actually having had a discussion with you in the previous forum on this international academic space. And hopefully today we'll be able to discuss another interesting topic relating to parenting and the challenges that we face as academics. So I'll hand it over to you, Vic and Mona, to start us off with today's discussion.
Thank you, Ray. I hope you're doing okay.
Good.
Thanks, Ray. I think this is a very good space to have for us as academics to share our experiences. To come together and really learn from each other and support each other. So I think this is a very, very good opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. Same here. Sometimes we operate in silos and we don't share our ideas, and that gets to us mentally as parents. And so today's discussion is mainly about parenting whilst being an academic, and we all have done this for several years, possibly decades. So the whole idea is to share our experiences and support each other, reflect on what has worked for us and what hasn't worked really well for us. I'll kick off the discussion by getting us to talk about how you see yourself playing the role of an academic over the number of years you've been operating, and how you combine that with parenting. Yeah, and I'll be happy to start with Mona.
Thank you very much, Vic. Yeah, I mean, there's no blueprint or guide that you can really follow. For me, it's really been trial and error. And as a parent, you need to, what I found is, I'm a different parent now than I was 5 years ago. You have to, every stage, needs a different parenting skill, and a whole set of different organization and planning, I would say. And I feel it's really all about updating your knowledge, your skills. And personally, I study about parenting. To be honest, I've done this course called Triple P in parenting. But it's one thing knowing about it and another thing actually applying it. I remember sitting on a plane with the notes, trying to see, and to kind of learn, okay, if the child does this, this is what you should do. And it's very difficult to actually put into practice. But I would say like updating your knowledge, like forums like this allow us to share our experiences, our struggles and challenges, and to really feel that actually, you know what, I'm not alone. There's other people who are going through this because, as you said, Vic, we do tend to work in silos. We think, this is very stressful sometimes, but to feel that other people are going through the same and to see how they manage it. I feel for me, it's, to be honest, very refreshing just sitting here today and knowing that, Vic and Ray, you also try to juggle this thing, as fathers is actually very refreshing for me, and to just have that kind of support and these discussions. So just like how we as academics, we updating our skills with AI and all that, I feel as parents we also need to have this support to discuss and to share experiences. And I don't want to talk too much because I can talk forever on this topic. So,
all right.
Yeah, maybe Ray, I don't know if you'd like to say something, and then I'll be happy to chip back in.
Yeah, I mean, what is very interesting for me is having this opportunity to actually express myself in more detail with regards to parenting and academic life, because I mean, there are times when you do feel like you're all alone, like you're going through this alone when you don't talk to other people, and the stresses and the pressures you get. And sometimes it's very important to have that kind of ability or that kind of opportunity to talk to others, to know what they're going through and how they're able to manage the things that they're going through. Or even knowing that you're not alone in it is also a very important part. I mean, this forum is a good forum, but at the same time, I remember that actually I'd spoken to other people who had also started, basically thinking that they were all alone when they were talking about the issues they were going through as parents, trying to take care of their kids while at the same time they have a lecture, they get a call from school that, your child is going through something. And then all of a sudden they have to think whether they should go inside the classroom and perform, as the energetic kind of academic, or should they do? And at the same time, feeling the pressure of maybe the university not accepting the excuse or the reason and thinking that maybe it's an excuse that they're putting front instead of actually something that is very important for them that they need to go and take care. And so how they balance that has been something that, people have gone through alone, and mentally they get affected. But when you talk to other people and realize that actually you're not alone and these things do happen, and at the same time, for example, it is important to acknowledge that this is part of our academic life, then it makes it a bit easier for you to try and find better alternatives of dealing with it. I mean, we are having this forum today, which is very interesting because last night I was just speaking to someone else who was telling me that they didn't have time to be able to talk to me on a meeting, and then we had to arrange a meeting at night because that's when the kids were asleep. And so, and not only asleep, but there are times when when you try to arrange meetings during the day, if for example they have kids at home who just want to hear everything and they jump on them, they and they interfere sometimes, not in a bad way, but it shows that there's a different way.
Talking of interference,
yes,
we will be coming to that. We will be coming to that specifically as far as the COVID-19 is concerned. But on my side, I have seen a transition from when I was a single man, young man, back in London, and I was enjoying my academic life, taking the underground and running to work in central London. And I can see a big transition from what I am now and what I was then. When I then got married and then went on to have kids, my whole life has changed, both in two different directions. One is very nice direction, and the other one not very nice direction. I remember when my first son was born, he was born on the 24th of December. So we weren't really having classes then, but the pressure that was on me when I was grading my assessment at the time, the pressure that came up on me when my second daughter was born, juggling between academic stuff and parenting, and the idea that you have added on to your family, you've expanded your nest from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and for some people even more, is something that I have never had the opportunity to talk about. This is the first time I'm actually talking about this. No one has ever asked me the question. I don't blame anyone for not asking me the question. It's just that it's not normally the case in our field. No one comes to you and asks you about your experiences with parenting and how that supports your work as an academic, or constrains your work as an academic. So I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. If you don't mind, because you've talked about interferences and that sort of thing, can we move straight then to how we juggle our work as academics during the COVID-19? And I remember I was teaching online and I had 3 other people who were on computer at the same time at home. So my experience wasn't very exciting at the time, but then it made me learn more about being patient, learn more about being tolerant, and trying to understand children's need at that point in time, that they have this desperate need. Hofstede talks about it, indulgence. When they need something, they want it now. If the computer is not working, the Wi-Fi is not working, they want it right now. And it doesn't matter if I'm teaching economics or whatever I'm teaching, I have to put that on hold and attend to them. Otherwise, they're going to be scratching the door and making noise. So that was a very different moment, and I would like to hear your thoughts about how you operated during the COVID-19 as a parent and academic at the same time.
I think for me,
yeah.
for me, I was wearing different hats. There was the morning part where, I had to teach the kids, do the homework, which was, very demanding because they had to upload their homework by a certain time. They had to be in Zoom for some sessions. I need to make sure they logged in. And then I had, the other hat where I had to prepare my classes and then do my teaching. I even took on, an overload to teach more subjects, and the classes were very large. I mean, in one class, I had, over 50 students to manage as well. So it was very challenging, I think, just playing the role of all these, different hats. And then, of course, you have other people who are trying to work and they need to be quiet because they have a meeting. So, I think we all experienced some difficulties, right? We needed that space. And I know a lot of people after the pandemic, they really looked at bigger home spaces, because if we were to go through something like that, at least you have the space, to share. So the home was an office, it was a school, it was a university, it was,
Yeah,
it
it was
became
everything.
everything in one, yeah.
Mm.
I think like how I manage it is like clear communication with my children. So I had to explain to them that, I'm working and I have to lock the door and you can't come in. They still were sending me notes under the door and,
Same here.
that kind of stuff. I remember my little one, he was, I think, 3 at the time. He would put the pillow on the floor and hold my hand while I was doing the lecture because it was his bedtime. I have photos of that, because he's confused, it's my bedtime and you're sitting on the computer. So I think we all went through that, and we luckily we survived, right? And it was not easy, I have to say.
Mm.
I was actually celebrating going back to campus and meeting students.
Great stuff. Ray,
Yeah.
do you have younger ones? I
Yeah.
mean,
So yeah, yeah.
and how did
I
you
mean,
cope?
very, very interesting to hear about that. Now I don't know where, I mean, Mona and Vic at that time during the pandemic, which they say country you were in, which then, with the different restrictions. But in the UK, when the pandemic began, um, well, one of the things that happened was we had, like a separation of the key workers versus, non-key workers. So for me, my wife is a key worker. So basically she was doing a lot of shifts. So she had to go in person. She was working at the care home. And so that gave, so she was going there all the time. And first of all, the panic was there in terms of just the pandemic itself, where you're not sure the interaction in care homes and how we were being told that it was really intense and people were getting infected. So we had to prepare quite a lot. And one of the things was we consciously said that my wife would not be touching the kids for the beginning. So basically I'll be dealing with the kids, just of the fear that, something might happen, they might be infected. And then therefore I had to be more hands-on with regards to, how I manage the kids. And so that had a lot of impact on how I was doing my teaching, my delivery. The one thing though is because my wife was a care worker, and I was considered in a way semi-care worker because of the academic profession. And so the school that my kids were going to, at this time there were 5 and 7, 4 and 4 and 6, turning to 5 and 7. So my girls go there and they were there, but most of the time, whenever something happened at school, whether someone coughs a bit, then they're taken back home. So I'd found, for example, I'm in the middle of a session, doing it online. The school calls me and says, you have to take your child right now because they coughed and we think this might be, COVID. So they have to go and do a test, which normally took about a week to come back. unless and then there are other circumstances. If you had a car, you could go drive-through. If you didn't have a car, I didn't have a car at that time, you cannot use a taxi to go to the drive-through. So it means you had to wait for a long time. But one of the hardest thing was, trying to juggle that as an academic. And I think the worst thing that happened during that time was when the school called me and they told me my daughter wasn't breathing. And I was doing my session, preparing everything. They called and they said, you have to come, your daughter is not breathing. It was one of the worst experiences you could have. So I left everything. I had to just, I leave. I was crazy. And at that time, I didn't have a car. The thing is, I was working from home. It's closer to my place. So I ran. So it's about 10 minutes. So I ran to the school. And I could feel, even now as I'm talking to you, I'm emotional about it because it was so intense. I was thinking, my daughter, the pandemic, she cannot breathe. She's gone. You get the point. And that feeling was a really, real bad feeling. And I was thinking, I didn't know if other people go through this and all that. But then that time, academia life just went on the side because I said, this is the most important thing. And it taught me a lesson as well, that because there are times when I used to be so engrossed in the work that I never paid a lot of attention to my kids, like, okay, daddy here. But then that time I realized, yes, academia is an important part of my life, but it is not the only part of my life. And so from that point on and moving forward, I've learned how to try and balance it a bit more and remember that even if you sometimes feel that, oh, my kids are here and they're distracting me, it is better to have that kind of distraction than not to have them at all. So it was a very emotional period. And I think, it is something which I've talked to a few people later on who have also, because it was almost traumatic. But a lot of people tend to be very closed in and not really express themselves with regards to this. But then the more I talk to people who have also gone through a few things, it removed the trauma a bit because you learn about how you try and cope with that kind of scenario. So
sorry to hear that, Ray. No, that's such a traumatic experience. If you don't mind, let's move on to specifically, how do we communicate our academic responsibilities to our family? And how do they take it? How do you tell your little ones or your spouse about something that you have to do either on a Saturday or on a Sunday or, after 5 p.m. and that sort of thing? How do you communicate that? And what sort of impact does it have on your families?
I think the key is give enough notice. So the more notice you can give, the better. So, so that nobody is surprised or disappointed or so what I try to do is on Saturday or Sunday to plan for the next week. I have calendars stuck on the doors so that everyone can see, so that it doesn't come as a shock and disappointment, because I'm going to be teaching Saturdays starting this Saturday. So it gives me flexibility to do things during the week, which is, very good. But of course, my weekends with the whole family is really disrupted, right? So, but I do try to make up for this on Sunday, so I can, I can be with the family and do things together. They don't like it, to be honest. My children don't like it when I have a meeting when they're here, because they have asked me actually this question: is your work more important to us than us? They
Yeah.
they're like, Mommy, are you saying that this is more important than me? Can't you help me with this? I need this, or I need help with my homework. So
That's an
have
interesting
this.
point, because
Yeah.
sorry to cut you. My little one asked the same question, but in a slightly different way. She actually told me to quit work and stay home. So I asked her, where is the money going to come from? And she says, no, we can just go to the bank and get more money. And every time we get more money. Of course, she doesn't understand it at her level. She does not understand it. So she wants me to quit work and be with her. Of course, psychologists believe that that bond, when they are young, as a parent, you have to have that bond with them. And all kids cherish that bond that fathers or mothers have with them. We all know that. And that is something that is so difficult on my part to communicate to a very young girl, that work is an important part of life. And I've chosen to be an academic. And therefore, there will be times that I would not be around. There will be times that I will not be with her. Take her to the playground, take her to the park, go bicycle riding with her. And she doesn't really understand that. So that is a little bit challenging, particularly when they are young. Sorry, Mona, I cut you. You probably want to continue with what you're saying.
No, so I think, on the positive side, I want to be a role model for them so that they can see, I work hard, I want the best for them, like any other parent, and that's why I'm doing this. And I think one thing very important is it's not the quantity of time that you spend with them. It's really about the quality. Because
would you agree,
just,
Ray?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting take, actually. I have come to actually, in my own experience, realize that the quantity and the quality actually do merge together. So one of the things which for me, for the past few years, I've been flying over from, the UK to Dubai, actually. And where I would spend quite, a significant period of time, like a month, or something at times, sometimes just 2 weeks, but where I'm away from my girls. And you do see that the one thing that was a bit of I think it helped them understand a bit is because I started very early. So when they were just born, they were pretty young. That's when I started my role, where I was flying over to another country. So they got used to it a little bit in that sense, where, oh, my dad flies over somewhere and then he comes back home. But there are times when they did ask, so daddy, what's going to happen? And I tried to explain to them that, what, I'm trying to lay a good foundation for you to also be coming to Dubai. So for example, and I just take pictures and I talk to them on the phone all the time. And, just to make sure that they know that they're on my mind, basically. And that, whenever I go, I go, but I'm just thinking of them. And that became a really important part, because what I've realized that kids sometimes also, you might take something for granted, very simple, but you just said, okay, let's sit together, right? And you sat with them and then they're telling you something. Just by sitting there with them, later on, they'll just say, Daddy, do you remember the time when you sat with me and I was telling you about this and that? You might have even forgotten what it was all about. So then they say, oh, Daddy spends with me quite a lot of time. So I've realized that, the time is also very important, but then at the same time, having the ability to show them, today I won't be here. It's not that I'm not thinking about you, okay? I'm here because I'm actually doing this for you, I want us to be able to go to a nice place. What do you think about that? Oh yeah, that would be great. Next time, do you want to come and join me? Or I take a video, and I always try and do that. And I think that creates this kind of the connection where you're putting them into your life of work. I'm going a little bit more in, but I just remembered one thing that I realized that actually I always tend to use my kids quite a lot in my discussions, even in the classes I teach, and I use them quite a lot in terms of what we do.
That's gonna be the second point.
Oh yes. So we'll talk. Yeah, exactly. So we'll talk about that. But yeah.
And so on that note, what I had in mind is how does parenting influence our teaching style? And is there any comparison between when we were not parents and when we are now parents? So essentially, how does being a parent influence our teaching style?
So I guess I'll dive in then, because I started talking about this. You see, one of the things that I didn't mention in the beginning was my in my academic career, I've been I worked in other countries before coming to the UK. And when I was actually doing my PhD in the UK, and I was finishing, actually, I was still working in a university in the UK. And when I was just about to submit basically I was on the deadline of submitting my dissertation, or my PhD thesis, basically. It was the night, so the night before the submission was when my wife gave birth. And so I was literally in the hospital with my laptop, typing final things, making sure that the acknowledgements and everything are okay. And, so it was one of, so basically that's when my second daughter was born. And it was a very interesting kind of experience to have, where you're having academia, meet, a new life being born and all. And so I have, over the years, been able to synthesize, maybe in a way, how I can use my experience with my children into the classroom, versus before, when before, as a young man who had been teaching for quite a while, I never really thought about that kind of scenario where I can give examples that relate to my personal life and my kids and all. And because I teach multiple modules, some of the modules are very more related to emotions, related to development, and all these things, to which most of the things and most of the literature does go around the idea of children and how they develop and all. And so I've used quite a lot of examples, which has come to my benefit in the end, in the sense that that has been something that I've been able to reflect on and use it in the classroom, compared to when I was I did not have children.
Excellent. In my case, just like you, and I believe Mona also has the same view, I use a refocusing strategy a lot in my class, because these days students get carried away. They are either on their mobile phones, or they have their own personal stuff that are troubling them. 45 minutes is probably too long to have a lecture or to have an academic activity. So when I feel that students are not focusing, I bring in my family issues. Not the negative ones, of course, but I tell them little stories about my kids. I tell them stories about my family as a whole, the holidays that we've been on. And I think at the end of the day, we are all human beings. So sharing something that is so dear to my heart and my family with other set of human beings in the class brings back their minds to the classroom, whatever they are doing, whether they are watching Netflix or whatever. As soon as you start talking about yourself or specific scenarios that have happened at home the night before, they tune in immediately. And then you do that for a couple of minutes and you switch back to the lecture or the activity again. And that works very well for me. So in my case, it's, specifically using it for those refocusing situations, as well as some students genuinely want to talk about our personal lives. They will come to you, they will ask you questions, and it's unavoidable. You cannot not talk about your personal stuff. Sometimes students come to me and say, "You look tired today. What happened?" And then I have to tell them, "Well, I couldn't sleep because there were issues with health. My kids are home." So those things work because students feel that we are not monsters. They don't look at us anymore as professors. They look at us as human beings after all, because we have human element to our lives. So that helps a lot in terms of getting closer to my students. Of course, they also tell me about their personal family stuff. So that's the way I leverage on that. Mona?
Yeah, I mean, that's very interesting to hear your stories. I think for me, it's, since becoming a mom, I've become, I think more resilient and flexible, I would say. Because you think, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like you can deal with this. And I have become also more understanding towards new parents. Maybe some of my students, they talk about, they're going to have a baby soon, or there was, for example, a student who was about to become a father. And so before I didn't really know what this took, and now I've become really more, I think I like to be more understanding, supportive, you know, both for new dads and new moms as well, and students, because they know, you know, that I have, you know, some experience with children. They will come to me and ask me about, you know, how did you do this, or how did you choose a school, or what should I do with that? So, you know, we end up just having that relationship, you know, stronger relationship. I think so.
Mm, mm.
Yeah. So I
I
Interesting.
think
mean,
similar to your
yeah,
experiences.
I mean,
Yesterday,
yeah.
yesterday I was reading a paper written by Derek et al. 2022. This group of academics collected a sample of about 10,444. And these were all scientists based all over the world. So talking about international academic space, this is quite important. These scientists were asked to report on different biases, and turns out that women get less citation. Not only women, but women who have children tend to have less citation. We know how important citation indexes are for us. So if it turns out that in the scientific world, women are getting less citations, particularly parents, female parents, that is an issue. So in our own career, it doesn't have to be where we are currently working, but over the span of our careers, have you faced any biases as a result of being a parent?
I think for me, I remember working in, you know, another institution where when I just had my first child, um, and I was looking at, you know, what support I can get, and I think there are lots of biases because people think, you know, you need to show your face. You need to show your face. And I was told this many times, you have to show your face. What are your colleagues going to think about you? You have to come, you have to, you know, be present, you have to show your face. Um, so I did feel that, to be honest, like, oh, she's just had a baby, we're not going to see her, we can't work on any projects, you know, she's in another world, you know. But at the same time, I was, you know, I was still doing my teaching. I was still, you know, at the time it was night teaching from 6 to 10 o'clock at night. I was still delivering. Um, and then I also had 8:30 morning classes. You know, so we do juggle and somehow manage. And I feel for me as a mom, because I know I have limited time, I try to fit as much as I can during, you know, that time when, let's say, my kids are in school or something. I have that window from, let's say, the moment I drop them 7 o'clock in the morning to 2 o'clock. I have to deliver because I know after two, I'm going to be hijacked with lots of other things, school activities, sports clubs, you know, sports day, school play, you know, all these things. So I actually find, and speaking to my, you know, some of my female colleagues as well, like we are very efficient, you know, with our time. We become very, very efficient with timing, constantly checking the minute by minute because you know that you need to fit everything in that window.
In my case, I'll talk more generally, although I have had some sort of experience with some institutions outside of the UK where it was quite imperative to have um, children educational allowance. So this was in Southeast Asia at some point when I was working there. And the institution at the time could not afford, it's not that they did not want to provide it, but they could not afford educational allowance for children. So uh, it, it, it dawned on me that the preference would have been to have uh, academics who were not parents, because that would be slightly more affordable for those individuals, which is a strong business case. And I support that from, you know, business point of view. I truly support that. But as someone who was at the receiving end of that sort of policy, it was quite critical. And then eventually when the other kid came along, it was a decision-making point to decide on what sort of education do I want for my kids. And so that became a strong point for us to move away from that location. So I believe many years ago, children education allowance was quite generous, but with the financial constraints and all the things that have happened, it's quite a challenge for a lot of institutions to provide adequate financial support, not only for educational allowance, but also for accommodation. There is a big difference between going international as an academic expatriate, as a single individual, versus going there with a group of 4 or 5. Most institutions these days are not likely to be supporting that sort of family. So that was some of the things that I experienced. But then occasionally, informally, you also hear stories about people saying, oh, you know, he's a father of 2. So, you know, those casual jokes puts you in a very different category where you keep wondering, is it because I'm a father I don't deserve to be in a particular group? So group of people going out for a night out, for example, and they have to ask you to ask permission from your family if it's okay to join them and that sort of thing. These are very subtle jokes, but they're vastly important to our lives as academics.
I mean, if I jump in there, I mean, the one thing that I think is very, maybe it resonates with quite a lot of people, for instance, who have, let's say, come to the UK, for instance, to be academics and their parents. Relates a lot to, you know, the actual process of migrating to the UK, and the laws and the complications and what the university has to do and offer, and also the allowances that are there. So, I mean, one of the things which I found very interesting was the difference between, for instance, an interviewing like committee who say they want you to be part of the institution, they want you to work for them, and then versus the HR process at the end, where after you do the interview and you believe that, okay, you're going to move into another country, you're coming, maybe let's say I'm coming from Tanzania and I'm moving to the UK, where there are a lot of implications to, you know, moving to the UK, for instance. So it could be issues related to paying for the visas, which is quite expensive to be able to do that. And so when you find that the institution actually says, okay, we are going to get you over here, don't worry. And then when you start the processes and, you know, you've decided that, okay, I'm going to move to another country, you've made a life-changing decision, you find that then they say, oh, but we're not going to pay for your family to come over, or we're not going to pay for your children. We're not going to. So all of a sudden, you're stuck in a point where they say, okay, we want you, but we don't want the kids, in a way. And you find that it was a very big part, I guess, of, you know, making a decision of moving to another country, where you have to look at the financing. How are we going to cope? How am I going to manage if I barely can make it, you know, with the expenses. If I was supposed to pay for myself, now I have to pay for my wife and 2 children to come over to the UK. And you're not given any salary immediately. You're not given any loan. There's no consideration. And so I think that on its own then has a lot of other implications, because it gives it, you know, it puts you at a disadvantage in a lot of things. The income financially, you're using quite a lot of money to get to a job which is supposed to actually give you the income to be, you know, living in a much better economic life in a way as an academic as well. And so I think there are these things which are there that are not normally explored, especially for international academics. And I think they should be highlighted, because if they are not, you do find that people, you know, suffering, you know, like themselves, they're thinking, does this organization really value me? Does it know who I am? Does it know that my family is part of me? You know, and so I think that is something which...
Do you also think that there is a business case for the institutions to make such statements, or sort of decide not to support the wider family compared with what has been happening many years ago? Because it seems to me the American model of higher education has arrived globally. It's down to the books. How much money is being made versus how much money is being spent on academics is quite important for such decisions from HR perspective.
Well, that's actually an interesting part, Vic. I mean, we also do work on HR, and I guess one of the things when we want to ultimately have maybe a more productive workforce, one of it is actually considering the way in which we engage the employee. That does involve looking at them beyond just them and the skill that they come with. Because looking at the skills is one thing, but they come in with a personality. So they come with a personality which has been shaped not only by their work ethics or the work and the learning they've acquired, to get the qualifications, but also by the people who are around them. And so we talk about work-life balance. Okay, we talk about all these things are very significant for an employee to be able to actually be more engaged with their work. And so you are bringing someone who might be very good, very talented, right? But then if we bring them with their talent, but they're not able to function because they're thinking about their family, then the talent becomes useless.
Yeah,
so
I agree. I think there has to be some sort of balance between the two. And to be fair, most institutions out there in the world, they will support a family as well as an academic. Would it be okay if we move on to talking specifically about research? Because in our field, research, love it or not, is a critical part of our survival. You either publish or you perish. But the same cannot be said when you are a parent. You really cannot be very productive with your research, at least not in my case, when you have expanded your family size, because you have to deal with each and every member of the family about their needs and whatever they want to bring onto you for discussion. So I can think of a number of examples where I'm writing up an empirical study and an illness occurs, and I have to abandon that because illness is something that you really cannot say you won't get engaged with. You have to go to the hospital, get a treatment in place for whoever is ill. And so if you have a deadline, definitely there's an issue there. And I have gone through this a number of times. My little one had some issues with stomach, and then we had to go to the hospital. We spent 3 days there. That was the same time I was about submitting a paper which has gone through review, and the deadline was, I had to ask the editor for an extension, and she was quite kind to extend the deadline for me, which is quite good. But there are issues. We cannot claim that having kids or having a family and writing research papers is the same thing. So I'd like to hear your take on this. What are your different experiences about research in specific terms?
Yeah. I just thought, because when you said that in my head, that is a very interesting part where me and another academic who we are similar in age and all, but again, we've had children at different times. And basically, this other academic was very highly productive in publications when, my kids were born, and he was, let's do this, let's do that. But then there were a lot of things that were circulating around my children, and there were a lot of things that I could not be able to do at that time. And the one thing is, so I remember I was taking even my girls just for to the park, normal stuff, where there are times when I have to engage, to stay with the girls, to give them time and space. And my friend was, oh, you know what, you're wasting a lot of time. You should, this time you don't take the girls there. You should go and, be in a room, lock yourself in, start publishing and doing all this. The surprising thing is, then they got children. And what happened was, they said, and this was one of the best things actually, but they said, Ray, I get what you were going through. I understand it now. He couldn't understand what I was talking about then, but he said, I understand it now. And one of the things is, I love research, I love teaching, I love, all this academic life, but you do find that, again, the balance is very important. And sometimes when you do find you've been moving too much towards the work rather than your family, it also drains on you. And so sometimes it's more of a sacrifice, I think, which is it's a worthwhile sacrifice where I will not choose my work over the children. And so if productivity definitely goes down in terms of publishing compared to what I'm doing. So
we are in a very different field, aren't we? I remember a long time ago, I used to work for a company called Power in the Midlands, and it was an academic job. It was office based, and I'll finish work at 4, get home, sit in the sofa, watch TV the whole weekend, and that was perfect. But I can't do that now. Whilst even driving, I'm thinking of ideas, and I'm pretty sure Mona has been doing the same because she's always been telling me about new ideas, and I do the same. So our mind is sort of 24/7, working on research, working on new ideas. And I'd like to hear from you, Mona. How does being a parent?
Sure. I mean, personally, I love research as well. I love the interactive side of it. I love to interview people and hear stories and understand. It helps me grow as a person. And before having children, after finishing my PhD, straight away I published within 4 months, maybe apart, 2 very good papers for very respectful journals. One of them was the International Journal of Human Resource Management.
That's a good
Few
one.
few months later, another one straight away. And I got this buzz. I was like, okay, let's go to the third one, and that's really how I saw my academic life is, I got these 2, so let me continue. I started doing the third one, and then when I had my first child, of course, everything had to stop. All my research activities. Um, of course, there are moms who are doing very well and publishing, but for me personally, the first few years is very, very challenging. When you have to wake up every 2 hours, you can just about manage going and standing in the class for me because I'm very hands-on, and I like to, I just didn't tell you this, but when my first child was born, I had to bring him to campus and put him in an empty room. It was called the nursing room at the time, and I would get someone from a company like who would stay. I would pay them per hour until I finished my lecture. It was, you can just about manage your day-to-day teaching, marking, and all that. And then the hours where, teaching was in the evening, 6 to 10, you go home and then you have to do the night shift with your child and so on. So naturally, research goes down the drain. But of course, in academia, you are who you are who you are because of what you publish, I feel, right? So the first thing people look at is your track record and so on. And I just feel, I'm at a stage now maybe where the children are a little bit older and I'm re-kicking my research activities and so on. But it's really a struggle for me, to be honest.
Mona, in our current in our current organization, the good news is we have different tracks for progression, which is something that is really commendable, that not many institutions do that. To expect all academics to be perfect in all areas is not that. So I think our institution at the moment is very progressive in that perspective. I can't remember exactly who said this. It could have been Benjamin Disraeli, who was a prime minister many years ago, or it could be Winston Churchill. And the statement goes like this: we make our buildings, and our buildings shape us. So I think it was it was Churchill. It's a Churchillian saying, we shape our buildings and thereafter our buildings shape us. If we bring that to the conversation, we make our children, and then later on, they also change us. So it's quite important to also reflect on how our children are changing us. We bring them into the world, but then they're also changing us. And all the conversations we've had today, I can hear us talking about how our lives have transformed around our children, which is quite important.
Yeah. Sorry, Vic,
we can go on.
I know we want to wrap up now, which
yes,
I think, but I want also to highlight that there's a lot of, it's not just about challenges. There's lots of positive things, that
absolutely.
We have evolved, I think, by having children, and they have, they bring joy, they bring better perspective, they make you
make us proud,
right?
They make us proud.
Yeah. And there's positive ways, like, they shaped our teaching practices as well, which we discussed. So
I think, yeah, Mona, that's brilliant. Sorry, and that's brilliant. I mean, because we might forget that when we talk about this as a challenge, we forget that actually it's challenges and opportunities. So there are a lot of opportunities that have emerged as a result of it. And I'm really happy to hear, some of the ways in which you have been, you use your connection with families, home, and all to do that. I mean, if I give a small example, just a few weeks ago, I actually used something that my children have asked me, Daddy, did you use this? And now my children are 6 and 8. And when we were on a holiday and we did collection of rocks, basically. And then when we were on the holiday, I said, oh, you know what? I've got an idea, because we're looking at the rocks. And I said, let's reflect on this. And we were just looking at them and making all these different things. And I said, you know what? I'm going to use this in my classroom. And the kids said, so they actually told me that you must use this in your classroom. So a few months later, I actually did, with executive MBA students, gave them a rock reflection exercise. And basically, their students have said that this is probably one of the best exercises they've ever done in all of their executive MBA, time. And so my kids are asking me, did you use that, Daddy? Yes. And there are a lot of things that we do. We watch a lot of videos together. And then we sometimes bounce off ideas of how we could use some of these things for my own teaching. You can imagine they're only 6 and 8 now, but that is how powerful they can be in enriching your academic life.
Well, I'm an old man, and my first one is always fixing my computer glitches. So, I have, as you probably know, we men, if you are in a committed relationship, your testosterone level goes down, which then compensates for, allows you to be more closer to your family and your children, for that matter. Now, as I'm getting almost close to my retirement age, I have lost my parents, and the only people I can think of at the moment are my kids and my family. So that's really, really important. And I don't know how I could have carried on as an academic without having kids around and having family around. So I think, Mona, that's a very good point you've raised there about the opportunities. There are so many, and hopefully in future we can revisit the topic. But for now, I think I'll bring it to a close, if you don't mind. Thank you very much for talking about your different experiences about parenting whilst being an academic over the decades you've been working. It's been very insightful listening to your contributions, and I hope you do also find my contributions over the number of years I've been working interesting. It's always good to continue sharing, and by sharing, I already feel very good. I feel that this is the first time I have actually reflected on my academic life, but I believe you also feel the same way. We have reflected on our academic life as far as our families are concerned, and I think it can only make us better. When we meet next time, I think the idea that we have agreed on is that we're going to be talking about future of work, particularly with regards to students, and how we can ensure that our teaching practice reflect what is required for the future to ensure that the students that we have in our classrooms are ready for the next 30 to 50 years. AI has disrupted the world, but when we meet, it will be a very, very beautiful conversation, I believe. I wish you all the best. And thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you. So
Thanks.
see you in the next forum. Bye bye.
Thank
Yes,
you.
bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.